Heading into the new NBA season, many believe that the Golden State Warriors will not only have one of the best bounce-back seasons that we've seen in the past decade, but also will shock many with their new and improved roster they put together this offseason. Sure, this team wasn't able to get a superstar like Damian Lillard or Bradley Beal, but what they were able to get is multiple sneaky good players that make this team one of the deepest that we've ever seen in recent years. And honestly, reminds myself and many of their talent-filled dynasty roster that dominated the league for years. But despite many believing that the Warriors made some small, insignificant moves, I believe the opposite is true, and it could lead to one of the greatest comebacks in the history of the NBA. Today we have to talk Golden State Warriors, and in particular, taking a deep dive into the new players they were able to acquire this offseason, and how they were able to sneakily form one of the best rosters in the league, as well as where this team statistically ranks compared to their championship roster from a few years ago. Because after taking a look at the numbers, they are just too good not to share with you guys. But before we dive into the Warriors, if you've been enjoying the content lately, it would be absolutely clutch if you subscribed if you're new and join the Woods crew. We are trying to get past the 10,000 subscriber milestone before the next NBA season begins on October 19th. And let me just say, I'm doing my part working overtime to get quality videos like this posted every other day. So if you could do your part and just hit that sub button below, I would truly appreciate it. But with that being said, let's talk Warriors. I know, I've said it 1,000 times, but during the offseason, many believed that the Warriors would be making a trade for a big star. But instead, they surprised the majority of people when they didn't do this, and instead made some smaller moves that got little to no attention. Despite the Warriors' offseason pickups getting swept under the rug, I believe that they could have a very large impact on this team's success. Because even though star power is the key to winning, you do in fact need an elite supporting cast around your team more often than not. Which is exactly what we saw in the NBA Finals last year with the Bucks and Suns, who were both littered with elite talent. Sure, these teams had superstars and stars, but they also both had insanely deep rosters that were able to have a positive impact when the stars needed to catch their breath. And in my eyes, the Warriors might be able to achieve this feat of an elite deep roster as well based on their offseason acquisitions. If you weren't aware, the Warriors were able to sign and trade for a variety of sneaky good players like Otto Porter Jr, Nemanja Bjelica, and Iguodala. And of course, the rookies Moses Moody and Jonathan Kuminga. With these 5 players alone, the Warriors already have an abundant amount of talent on their bench unit. Not to mention, players they already had like Jordan Poole, Kevon Looney, and more, who showed that they can in fact step into a bigger role if given a bigger opportunity. As far as the eye test goes though, many NBA fans who haven't been paying attention to these players, or the Warriors in general, might think that the bench unit is just, well, average. And all I have to say to that is this take is far from the case, because the way the Warriors were able to construct their roster fit-wise is what makes it have truly high potential. I already made an entire video about Jonathan Kuminga and Moses Moody, so if you want to see that, I'll link it down below or at the end of this video. But today, I want to talk about the new additions, because to say that they're a good fit for the Warriors team is an understatement. Starting off with Otto Porter Jr, in my eyes, this move is not only one of the most underrated moves for the Warriors, but one of the most underrated moves out of anyone in the entire offseason. Porter Jr is one of those low-risk, high-reward signings, because despite facing a variety of injuries that have kept him sidelined in the past couple of seasons, he still has immense potential to be a great scorer, and potentially elite 6-man type player off the bench. Last year with the Bulls, Porter Jr wasn't exactly the best, averaging a stat line of 10 points, 2 assists, and 5.5 rebounds. Keep in mind that the man only played 28 games last year, and when he was finally hitting his groove, he got injured, so I think it's safe to say that what we saw out of him last year is about as bad as it gets. Which means that there was a lot of upside to this signing, and the stats don't lie. Despite not having the best season last year, in the past decade of being in the league, Otto Porter Jr has shown that he can be an elite 3-point shooter. Since his NBA career began, Porter Jr has had 4 seasons where he shot the ball over 40% from beyond the arc, and in 2 of those seasons he played in over 70 games, which shows how consistent he really was. To put his elite shooting in perspective even more, let's just take a look at his teammates Steph Curry and Klay Thompson. And yes, we have to whip out the chart, because it makes things a lot more interesting. Starting off with Curry, who is widely considered as one of the best shooters of all time, so far in his 12-year career, he has averaged a 3-point percentage of 43.3%, which is considered top tier by many. But looking at the other splash bro Klay Thompson, he has a career 3-point percentage of 41.9% in his 8 years in the league. Now, let's take a look at Porter Jr, who despite seeming young to many, is entering his 9th year in the NBA. Any guesses on what his 3 percentage is? Well, to my surprise, Otto Porter Jr has a career average 3-point percentage of 40.2%, just trailing behind Curry and Klay, who are considered 2 of the best shooters in the history of the NBA. Now, I know this might seem crazy to many, but we do have to keep in mind that Porter Jr is only taking about 3.5 threes a game, and Steph and Klay average double that. But for a bench player on a near vet minimum deal, you do have to admit, that's some elite veteran shooting to add for the price. But how does Porter Jr fit with the team as a whole with his playstyle? Well, after taking a look at how Porter has played on his previous 3 teams, I believe that he's a seamless fit with the Warriors because of one thing and one thing only, that being shooting. As you all know, the Warriors system is heavily influenced by shooting, and well, to put it simply, the more perimeter weapons that this team has, the better their offense will be. Despite being streaky at times, Porter Jr. has shown that he always bounces back and evens out his stats with his elite shooting. And with the team missing Klay until Christmas, Porter Jr. could very well be the spark off the bench this team needs, and provide great spacing if he's given some spot minutes with the starters. Otto has also shown that he can be a versatile player and play at the 3 and 4, which means that we could see some interesting Warriors lineups if they need to get his shooting in the game. All in all, Porter is a jack of all trades in my opinion, and even though his shooting is what shines brightest, I think that he'll be an all-around great player for the Dubs, and even potentially take on a 6-man type role, and lead the young players off the bench with his veteran leadership alongside the next player this team snagged, Iguodala. If you're an OG Warriors fan, you would know that Iggy is one of the better pickups this team could have made, because well, he already knows the system, and can be the veteran guy that this team needs off the bench. During his time with the Miami Heat, Iguodala showed that he can still in fact be the glue guy veteran piece that does the dirty work when the team needs him. And even though his shooting isn't the best, you can't deny that he can still turn up in the biggest moments and surprise everyone. With the Warriors having a plethora of shooters at their disposal, getting a more well-rounded two-way player is exactly what this team needed. And they got just that with the Iguodala signing. Iggy can mentor guys like Kuminga and Wiggins alongside Draymond Green, which could speed up their development and help the team win now. But most importantly, the young Warriors team gets championship experience from Iggy, who has been in solid playoff runs since he left the Warriors. Not to mention, he was a part of their dynasty. We all know what Iguodala will bring to the team, so this isn't necessarily a signing like Porter Jr. But what I will say is that it's a feel-good story, and Iggy still provides a lot of value to the team if he still has a couple years left in the tank. But unlike Iguodala, the Warriors' last significant signing has similar boom or bust potential to Otto Porter Jr. You guessed it, I'm talking about Nemanja Bjelica. Last season, Bjelica also got the short end of the stick when it comes to injuries, being that he only played 25 games with the Sacramento Kings. During this time, his stats were, well, mediocre at best, averaging 6.5 points, 3.4 rebounds, and 1.9 assists. A very similar stat line to Porter Jr. But after his injuries last year, Bjelica was traded to the Miami Heat, where he sneakily showed he has the potential to be a great role player still. Sure, he only played 14 minutes per game, but during this time, he averaged shooting splits of 44, 37, and 56, which, although shows he's horrendous from the free throw line, also displays his potential to be an elite perimeter shooter. Don't let the bad stats fool you, because Bjelica has shown flashes of being great in recent years, being that in his 2019-2020 season, he averaged 11.5 points, 6.4 rebounds, and 1.9 assists on elite shooting. Bjelica is just another guy that has the potential to bounce back and be an elite shooter, because if we pull up the chart from earlier, Bjelica is only a couple percent behind the other 3 guys I mentioned as far as 3-point percentage goes. So if he's able to lock in, he could be yet another double-digit scorer off the bench for this team. This isn't where it ends though, because Bjelica also brings one thing I believe the Warriors need desperately, that being size. If you didn't know, Nemanja Bjelica stands at 6'10", which means that he definitely has the size to be a backup big this team needs, and with the ability to stretch the floor with his shooting, he makes the Warriors bench unit that is already full of shooting even more lethal. The transition game is where it gets even better though, because with the Warriors having one of the fastest paces in the league with guys like Poole and Curry initiating the fast break, this will provide a large amount of opportunities for Bjelica because of his shooting ability. In the past, he's shown willingness to get down the court quickly and get easy buckets, so if he continues this habit, he should be a near double-digit scorer solely based on the fast break buckets he should get. When Bjelica gets minutes with the starters, in my eyes, there is no reason that the Warriors offense doesn't flourish, because guys like Steph, Klay, and even Jordan Poole will draw a lot of attention from defenses, which in turn should leave guys like Bjelica wide open a good amount of the time to cash in on 3 balls that he is more than capable of making. All in all, I have to say that despite not getting a star, I am very impressed with the Warriors offseason and what they were able to do. This team has so much shooting and depth, it's hard to picture them doing anything else aside from winning. And if Porter Jr. and Bjelica pan out, I believe the team will do just that. Let me know down below who you think the Warriors' best pickup this offseason was, and where you think they'll rank next year in the standings, as well as what Warriors video you'd like to see next. Thank you all so much for watching, I'll catch you on the next one, what's up?